And the person in this country who has had the most impact in a positive way on American politics in this presidential election is one Bernie Sanders. So, we got to get Sue elected, we got to get Hillary elected, and I'll tell you, we're all going to be fired up and ready to go fast when we hear from Senator Bernie Sanders. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, let me thank Windsor County for sending Peter Welch to the State House and then to the United States Congress. He's doing a great job there. And Peter has, as you know, he lives in a difficult environment. And as he likes to say, he works every day with some of the best minds of the 17th century. That's what he says. I'm just paraphrasing Peter. But it's true. But I want you to know, our delegation is small. It's Senator Leahy, Congressman Welch, and me, and we work as hard as we can for Vermont. And he is doing a great job for us in the U.S. House. So thank you, Peter. And I want to thank and congratulate Matt Dunn. Matt ran a hard, issue-oriented campaign for governor. And when you raise the right issues, it improves life in the state. You get people thinking about important issues. So Matt, thank you very much for your efforts. I don't have to tell anybody here today that our country faces some enormous problems. And the most enormous problem that we face is that we don't discuss the enormous problems that we face. So you can watch the television till the cows come home, and what you hear about are scandals and polls and fundraising, but you don't hear about why the middle class is declining. You don't hear about income and wealth inequality. You don't hear about why we are the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people, or the only major country not to guarantee paid family and medical leave. You don't hear about the fact that we are facing a planetary crisis which gets worse every day in terms of climate change. You don't hear about the fact that we are paying by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. And there are people in Vermont and throughout this country who are getting sicker and in some cases dying because they cannot afford the medicine, while the pharmaceutical industry last year, the 5 major companies made $50 billion in profit. Gross. So the first thing that we have got to do, if we are serious about addressing the problems, is acknowledge the problems. Three brief issues I want to touch on. First of all, and this worries me very, very much, and it's not a sexy issue, but it is an enormously important issue. Just as a fact, this morning we were driving up, Phil and I were driving up to Junction, where we did the first event. This is our 4th event of the day. And we're just getting warmed up. I just don't know if I can get these old people to keep up with me. That's But I was driving, we got a phone call from a guy I won't mention, but he's one of the leaders of the Democratic Party. And he is nationally. And what he is worried about is that as we speak, the Koch brothers and a handful of billionaires are in the process of trying to buy the United States Congress. They are spending, in the last 2 weeks of this campaign, just one group, or 2 groups, spending $36 million in 6 states to make sure that they retain control of the United States Senate. So the first issue that we have got to deal with is to understand that wonderful men and women from White River, from Burlington, from our state, all over this country, put their lives on the line to defend American democracy. And what we in Vermont understand democracy to be is one person, one vote, not billionaires buying elections.
That's right.
And I worry very much that if current trends continue, we're going to lose the foundations of American democracy and end up with an oligarchic society in which the billionaire class not only controls the economy, but they control our political life as well. And that is why I know that I speak for Congressman Welch and I speak for Pat Leahy and for all of you in saying we have got to overturn this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision. Because if we don't, all of the other issues that we care about, the environment, education, healthcare, etc., are not going to mean anything if we continue to have a Congress that is beholden to a handful of billionaires. Now, the second issue, people say, well, why is Trump doing so well? You got a guy who's total outrage. This guy brags about assaulting women. He lies every other day. How does he do so well? And I'll tell you why he's doing so well. And Peter Welch told the story. We were at UVM a few days ago. And when you get a hold of Peter later, he'll tell you this story because it's a very important story. He went to West Virginia, as I recall, Peter, with a colleague of his from West Virginia in the Congress. And Peter went down to the coal mines, and he talked to some of the workers there. And what he learned and what he saw, and what we all know, that if you're a coal miner, that is a very hard and dangerous life. And people there are not just upset. All right, I understand they're upset that some of us don't think that coal is the future of this country. But what they are mostly upset about is that nobody is hearing their pain. And it's not just coal miners, it is workers in White River, it is workers all over this country. And they're asking themselves a very simple question. One that we have got to deal with, or you won't see it on CNN or CBS. And that is, how does it happen that in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, how does it happen when technology has significantly increased worker productivity? Why is it happening that today the top 1/10 of 1% now owns as much wealth as the bottom 90%? You got that? 1/10 of 1% owning as much wealth as the bottom 90%. Here in this community and in Burlington, all over this country, you got people working not one job, they're working 2 jobs, they're working 3 jobs to cobble together enough income and health care to take care of their families. And yet today, 52% of all new income is going to the top 1%. 48% goes to the bottom 99%. This is not the economy that we deserve, and this is an economy that has to change. Our job together is to create an economy that works for all of us, and not just billionaires. Third issue, and all of these issues, very often I'm asked, the media says, well, tell me what the most important issue is. There is no the most important issues. All of these issues and many more are enormously consequential, not only for our country, but for the world. But how can we ignore the reality today that virtually the entire scientific community is in agreement that climate change is real, it is caused by human activity, and it is already causing devastating problems in our country and throughout the world. That's the reality. And one of the great embarrassments is, look, Peter and I will disagree with Republicans on many, many issues. But it is really mind-blowing that you have a major political party, with few exceptions, and a presidential candidate who does not even acknowledge the science and thinks that climate change is a hoax. Now, Now, how can you develop public policy if you reject science? How are we going to develop policies so that our kids and our grandchildren will live on a planet that is healthy and habitable if we don't move aggressively to transform our energy system? There's another, and there are a million issues out there, but there's just one more that I bumped up against all throughout this country. And that is, we have a broken criminal justice system. And that is manifested in the fact, if you can believe it, that we have more people in jail today, disproportionately African American, Latino, and Native American. We have more people in jail than any other country on earth. China, 4 times our size, fewer people in jail than we have. We spend $80 billion a year locking up fellow Americans. Here in Vermont, as I understand it, we spend more money locking up people in this state than we invest in higher education. We need to work together to reform a very, very broken criminal justice system. And the last point that I would make is Secretary Clinton and I, after the campaign was over, we reached some agreements on issues that I think are very important. She understands, and I understand, that in a highly competitive global economy, we need the best educated workforce in the world if the United States is going to retain and have a decent standard of living for its middle class. And yet, we got hundreds of thousands of bright young people in Vermont and throughout this country who did well in high school, who want to go to college, but cannot get a higher education for one reason, and that is their families cannot afford to send them to college. And then we have millions of people who have left school, graduated or dropped out of college, who are deeply in debt. So a young physician in Burlington, she's practicing medicine at the community health center there. She left medical school $300,000 in debt. I met a young dentist in Iowa graduating dental school. We desperately need new dentists, $400,000 in debt. All right? Secretary Clinton and I reached what I think was a sensible proposal to campaign on together. And that says that, number one, in America, we will make public colleges and universities tuition-free for every family earning less than $125,000. And number two, there are a number of proposals included in our idea which will substantially lower student debt. Two of the ideas are as follows. Number one, there are people in this room who are carrying student debt at 6, 8, 10% interest rates, when you can go out and buy a car at 1 or 2% or refinance your home at 3%. What Secretary Clinton and I believe is that you should be able to refinance your student debt at the lowest interest rate that you can find. And second of all, and equally important, there is a program which most people are not familiar with. It's called the National Health Service Corps. And what that program says to people in medical school, dental school, or nursing school, that if you are prepared to practice medicine in an underserved area, the federal government will forgive your debts. And Secretary Clinton and I want to triple funding for that program, which will get doctors and dentists and nurses into communities all over this country that desperately need that help. But I think we've got to expand that program, because I think in our country we desperately need good teachers, we desperately need good child care workers, we desperately need good people in law enforcement and in other public areas. My view is that if somebody is willing to serve the public in whatever capacity, we should forgive those debts as well. There are 50 states in this country. And what happens is that when a state does something smart and effective, the other 49 states watch and observe what happens. My vision has always been that we need a government here not only that improves lives for the 630,000 people in our state, but that we have a state which becomes a model, an example for the rest of the country. If we raise the minimum wage to a living wage, 15 bucks an hour in Montana and in Illinois, they're going to say, we want to do that as well. If we have pay equity for women in Vermont, the rest of the country will demand that. If we move to guarantee health care to all people and take on the pharmaceutical industry, other states will be looking at us as an example. These are tough times, and what worries me most is that so many people, A, are giving up on the process, or B, are beginning to blame their neighbors and other Americans for the problems just because of the color of their skin or because of the country they immigrated from. We have got to focus on the real issues, and we have got to come up with real solutions. And Vermont can be a leader, a national leader in that direction. So as Sue and David just told you, we've got 10 or so days left to this election. Let us not only make sure that we all vote, but that we bring our friends and our co-workers out to vote as well. If there is a large voter turnout in Vermont, these guys win. But let me tell you something, just to put it right on the table. If there is a low voter turnout, they will likely lose. And that's what it's about. So our job is to have the largest voter turnout in the history of the state of Vermont. And as Sue and David said, they can't solve all the problems alone. And that's not what democracy is supposed to be about. So let's work as hard as we can up to November 8th. And then on November 9th, we continue the effort. We work with them to help transform this state and this country. Thank you all very much.